with us. So today, Richard and I have Kim Palmer, and Kim is a certified real estate appraiser with over 25 years of experience. She's licensed in Virginia, Maryland, and DC, and she's the owner of Marquee Appraisals, a firm with a team of 14 appraisers serving clients from Baltimore to Richmond. In this session, Kim will provide a detailed overview of the appraisal process across different loan types, including conventional FHA, VAN jumbo loans, and she'll highlight the key differences between each, offer strategies to avoid common FHA and VA repair issues, and share practical tips for agents to support a smooth appraisal process, along with the common pitfalls to avoid. So as I just said, feel free as Kim is talking to go ahead and if you have questions, just let us know. Just take yourself off of mute and let us know that you have a question, and she'll be happy to answer those on the spot. Okay, so Kim, why don't you get going, and we'll get started.
Thank you so much for having me out today. I really appreciate it, and thanks for everybody's time. I always feel like this is a great opportunity for agents to realize that we aren't the bad guy, and we want your deal to go through just like everybody else in the entire process. But you have to understand that we have rules and regulations that we do have to follow in the appraisal process and how we develop value. So I'm hoping that gives you a little insight sometimes about why maybe something comes in low and why an appraiser does something the way they did, and that isn't how you developed the value of the property. So we'll start with kind of the key differences between the loan types. Obviously, you've got your FHA and VA loans. How we develop value doesn't really differ depending or based on the loan, right? But the selection and the process is a little bit different. So for example, on an FHA or VA loan, we have the stricter inspection requirements. You have to have handrails. You can't have peeling paint on a home built prior to 1978 anywhere. That's inside, outside the property, sheds, fences, etc. Outlet covers. I always say it's, think about some 3 or 4-year-old running around the house and how could they hurt themselves? That's how you have to look at it. Some safety issues regarding that. Railings on the back deck. We always say it's like the door that opens to nowhere and someone could fall to their death. These are the things that FHA and VA appraisers are looking for in that process. The newest thing that FHA came up with, and VA follows everything that FHA does, is having the pressure relief pipe on a hot water heater be no less than 6 inches from the floor. These are things that people have never heard of, but you'll start to see them be required as conditions on those appraisals. But that's just the inspection part of it, right? Value, again, our methodology doesn't change, but our comp selection does. I think the common misconception for VA appraisals is, I understand that they take longer. I feel like the VA panel is chock full of people that probably should retire and let the next generation come in and do things. I still see VA appraisals that have hand-drawn sketch. Blows my mind. But something to consider, right? The appraisal process is an art and a science, and the VA appraisal is the easiest to make value. They do not have the same kind of strict underwriting guidelines that an FHA or a conventional loan may have. And I can be much more creative in my comp selection, going back a year for a comp for a particular reason. I just will tell you, I know you don't think it because everybody thinks the VAs come in low all the time, but that is simply not the case. They really are the easiest for us to be more creative in obtaining our market value for those particular loan types. So keep that in mind. A conventional loan does have less strict inspection requirements, but do know that there are many lenders that are still going to require health and safety issues to be an issue. So I was talking about that railing off of the back deck. Even on a conventional, that would have to be installed. I've had some come back and ask about, some rotting wood, something that may affect the structural integrity of a property. Even on a conventional, those would have to be required if the appraiser deems it necessary and or the underwriter. So the issue with a conventional loan, and in my opinion, of doing this for 25 years, what's changed after our crash, is that Fannie and Freddie have created desktop underwriting. So when my appraisal is sent to Fairway, they put it through an automated underwriting model, and it scores my appraisal from a 1 to a 5. And a 1 is good and a 5 is bad. So, and it also spits out 20 comps and it compares my comps to what's on this list of 20. And if mine aren't on the list, I'm going to get an email from the underwriter that's going to say, why didn't you use 1, 2, and 3 in your appraisal? And my answer cannot be because they don't support the market value or the contract price, because obviously that's not what they're looking for. So they have totally done away on conventional loans with the ability to cherry pick a comp. So please keep that in mind. And we're going to talk about it a little bit here in like what we like to get from agents as part of our appraisal package is, I want you to tell me why I shouldn't use a comp. I have the same access to Bright MLS that you do. I can see all the comps that are there, but I need to know why this one sale that sold $50,000 less than everything else, why I shouldn't use it, because it's going to come up on Fannie Mae's list, and I'm going to have to explain why it wasn't used. So we like to nip that in the bud ahead of time and say, hey, there were some comps in the neighborhood, they weren't chosen, and this was the reason why. So do understand that for conventional loans, you can't just ignore those really good recent proximate comps, because Fannie's going to throw them in our faces if we don't use them. So you can't just go to a competing neighborhood and ignore what's inside, because they have eyes on everything. Now with everything being automated, you can imagine that they have access to all that same information, and they want to know, well, why didn't you use the comp that's located next door? And it may very well be that it sold below market, it was a divorce sale, or it smelled inside, or it had a really steep backyard, or there's some reason, right? That's what I'm looking for, is tell me why I shouldn't use the comp that isn't going to support your value. That's super helpful for us in the appraisal process, but it does restrict us in our comp selection for conventional loans. FHA has something somewhat similar. There's no grading of it, and they don't spit out the 20 comps to look for, but they do have their own portal that does their own sort of underwriting and says, hey, yay or nay, whether that's going to fly. And the VA is just an SAR, which is a VA reviewer, and they look at it and they say, yes, it's good to go. And they generally have no issues with any comps an appraiser selects. And that's why I say it really is the easiest loan program to make value on. So if you've got a tight one and you've got several offers, don't poo-poo the VA, because sometimes that will end up being great for you. Does it take longer to get a VA appraisal done? Yes. But the wonderful thing about it is you do have the Tidewater process. So you're going to know before the appraisal is turned in if the value is going to come in low, and you have that opportunity then to provide comps to the appraiser, prior to the report being turned in. Because I will tell you, right, I understand there's a lot of appraisers that once they set their value, they dig those heels in. They're like, we're not changing our value. So with the VA process, you get the opportunity to do it before. So it's nice. Did someone have a
Hey, Lucky. Good. How are you?
Hey, Dave, can you mute yourself? Okay.
Oh. I thought it was a question. Okay, so that's kind of, those 3 loan criteria. Then you've got jumbos, right? Kind of a different breed. You get into jumbo loans, they're not necessarily underwritten by Fannie and Freddie, so it's really a little bit different process. Sometimes if it's high end, you're $2 million or more, you're actually going to do a side-by-side appraisal. They have 2 of them done, and they compare the 2, and they need to be super close to one another. Otherwise, we both have to do some explaining about why there's a large difference between them. A lot more goes into a jumbo appraisal as far as the uniqueness of a property, right? Because then you start getting into quality, and it's done by some famous architect, and that's why it's selling really high. And it just requires a whole lot more from the appraisal standpoint to justify the value. They generally want at least 4 settled sales on a jumbo, whereas you only need to have 3 on a conventional FHA or VA loan. So it's just a little bit more in depth of a process on the jumbo side of things. And you're going to see wider ranges of values, right? I mean, you go and look at some of these houses that we do, and we've got a sale that looks just like it for 1.1 million and another one at 1.5. Why? And we have to reconcile that and make the underwriter understand why there's a wide range of values in these sort of high-end properties. So they're just a little bit, need more commentary, a little bit more time to get those done. But the process, not any different. You may get calls, though, if you sell a high-end property from an appraiser, really picking your brain about some of the upgrades or what to justify that contract price that you got for that property. So that's always helpful, especially if you could keep photos in your listings, particularly on the high-end properties. that just makes all the difference in the world and might save us from having to call you to ask questions if we can really sort of dig through those 60, 70 photos to see what the level of upgrading is of a property to be able to extract if a quality or a condition adjustment is required on that. So there's your loan process. I think probably the next thing is, what do I look for as far as comps, right? So I always start in the neighborhood first, right? That's just appraisal 101. I'm going to start in the neighborhood if it has one, right? I could be out in Fauquier County and it's not even in a neighborhood. But if it is in South Riding or something like that, generally there's plenty of comps to choose from. You really need to have a very good reason why you would go outside of a large community like that, Brambleton, things like that. Perhaps if you have the property with an in-ground pool and there haven't been any sales in the past year with a pool, then that might explain why you would go outside, but you're always going to stay inside first. We're going to stay at 180 days first. And I wouldn't go beyond 180 days unless I needed, again, to find a sale with a special feature. Maybe we have the nicest house in the neighborhood or the biggest or the smallest. And I might need to expand for that particular reason, but 180 days would be where I would start, and then I would expand from there if I can't find what I'm looking for. FHA is going to require me to have 2 sales within 90 days, and they're also going to require me to provide 2 listings. That's really hard right now in this market where we have very little inventory to provide 2 listings. And I will tell you, it's happening. It is happening that my listings are not supporting my settled sales. And it's becoming a problem. So if you get a call from an appraiser asking for your contract price, this is why, because one, we're hoping you sold over list because ours probably did or is higher than your listing. And that will help us support our market value because we cannot have our listings be lower than our contract, our market value that we're establishing. So please disclose your contract prices. It is the key to making the market move in the direction that we want it to move. Because if I have to do what's called the principle of substitution, which means that I can't appraise my subject property for more than what the listings are currently showing, it's going to hurt everybody, right? It keeps the market down. So if you know, hey, yeah, I got an under contract, it's $50,000 over, but we haven't had the appraisal yet. I'm like, that's okay. I'm still going to put all that commentary in there and I can support it to the reader that at least you did get a contract for that $50,000 over list, and it helps support my contract price. So super helpful. Please disclose that information. And then as far as comp selection, so if I'm doing a colonial, I'm generally looking for colonials. If I'm doing a rambler, I'm looking for ramblers. It's not to say I can't use different style homes for something. I mean, I could have a really small colonial and I might need to use a rambler because it's similar in size. And then I would just do a market analysis to see if I think there's an adjustment to be had. I will say most of the time there is not for design style. And then I'm going to look at living area. So generally we like to stay within 25% of the subject's living area. I can expand from that. Everything is okay to expand, but that's where we start. And then we would move from there to find comps that exceed that 25% limit. And then something with similar bed and bath count. So now one of the things that's on this list is talking about living area and how it's calculated. So please understand the difference between above grade and below grade in the appraisal process. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac decided in March of last year that we had to measure all homes to what's called the ANSI standards, ANSI. You can look it up. It's great reading with a glass of wine. And it explains how we have to measure a property to the nearest 1/10 of an inch. We have to cut out 2-story areas. Back in the day, we always cut out 2-story family rooms. We never cut out 2-story foyers. Now they require us to cut those out. Any unfinished areas in the basement, like utility rooms, things like that, all of that has to be cut out and shown as unfinished space. So ANSI does change the game a smidgen. And it changes it from the perspective of garage townhomes are a big problem. So I'm sure you've seen that there's many counties that count the garage level of a 3-level up townhome as basement area and the 2 levels above as above grade living area. Well, from ANSI's perspective, they don't care what the tax record says. We've always measured to tax records, but they say, nope, if it's above grade, you have to include it in the living area. So now we have to recalculate our subject properties as 3 levels above grade. And our comps, we don't do that because I don't get to measure my comps. So I can't recalculate those unless I'm just making up a number. I mean, obviously, if they're the same model, I can get it close, but we generally don't. And I can tell you it's caused problems. I had one a while back up in Maryland where the county counted it as basement. I did it as basement, didn't make value. The agents thought that was why I didn't make value, because I didn't count it all up. And then they, got all huffy and they said, oh, we got to do it to ANSI standards, count it all up. And I did, had to cut out that utility room that's in the basement that's unfinished. Now it's even smaller. And it made the value go down even more. So everything that's conventional, FHA and VA don't follow this. Please keep that in mind. Can be a little tricky. So when you're pricing your properties, make sure you're looking at what the tax record says the living area is, and know that if it's a 3-level townhouse all above grade, the appraiser is going to be counting that basement area behind the garage as now above grade in a conventional setting. And that's going to change things, right? Fairfax County does a terrible job of providing, the size of basements in their tax records. So it's really difficult for an appraiser sometimes to extract that. So how living area can be super tricky in the appraisal process. And if you ever have any questions, I'll give you my contact information. I'm happy to sort of go through like each individual one. If you've got a weird one, that maybe the living area doesn't look quite right from tax records to how an appraiser measured it, I can certainly help with that. But let's go with a split level, for example. So we know a split level has the level that you walk in on, the level that you go up, and then you've got one that's below that. In the appraisal process, those upper 2 levels are the only ones that count as living area. And some people are like, oh, but that 3rd level has a completely walkout, back rear, but it doesn't matter. Any tiny portion that's below grade is going to be considered basement for an appraiser. That's how tax records does it. That's how ANSI requires it. And that's how we will measure it. So I see a lot of times where something is listed as a 1,500 square foot house, but it's really only 1,000 because they've included that lower level in their numbers, as well as the rooms that are below there. So there could be a bedroom and a bath in that level, and now all of a sudden you're sending me comps for a 4-bedroom 3-bath when you're really only a 3-bedroom 2-bath above grade. So our comps are going to be always based on above grade, and you will get credit for what's in the basement, but it is treated differently in the appraisal process, and it is shown differently. It's the number one message that I get almost every day is I missed a bedroom or I missed a bathroom. And 99% of the time it's because it's in the basement and the agent or borrower, whomever, didn't know how to read the appraisal and how it was shown as below grade. And, oh, but it has a window, and oh, it has this, but it doesn't matter. If it's any portion below grade, that's how the appraiser is going to calculate the living area. Split foyer, same thing, right? You walk in on that middle level and you go up, that's the living area. You go down, that's the basement. Same scenario that I've seen time and time again, right? I get comps from an agent of a colonial, a 2-level colonial that's 2,000 square feet, and they want me to compare that to this basically 1-level split foyer with a basement that's only 1,000 square feet, and we're just in a totally different price range. So please keep in mind how an appraiser calculates living area as above grade, and the bedrooms and baths above grade are what's important. So when I'm pulling my comps on a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, split foyer, that's what I'm looking for. I know it probably has 2 bedrooms and a bath in the basement, but I'm not looking for a 5-bedroom, 3-bath above grade home. It's just a very different ball game. So I'm not sure who's ever heard the term bracketing in the appraisal process, but it means that we cannot have all superior or inferior features across the board. So if I have a 2-bedroom, 1-bath subject property that I'm appraising, all of my comps can't be superior 2-bath above grade homes where I'm making an across the board adjustments for bath. One has to have 1 bathroom in order to show the reader or the underwriter the marketability of a home that only has 1 bath above grade. Same with like interior unit versus end. I couldn't use all end units to compare to my interior. I can't use all bigger or smaller homes to compare to my subject. I need to have one on each side, and that's how we extract our adjustment from the market and show the marketability of a particular property. So super important, right? So I get that all the time. We've got our comps on the grid. We get a reconsideration of value. And all the comps they provide are bigger, have more bathrooms, they're superior end units, they're larger lot sizes. All of those are important features that have to be bracketed. And then all your reconsideration comps are all superior, and then you're just going to get thrown out and say, nope, you didn't even provide me something similar in size. So keep that in mind in the process, right? That when you're providing comps or looking at comps, that you are looking at ones that are on both sides of the aisle. So if you have a 2-bedroom, you have to find something with a 2-bedroom I just had an agent call me yesterday, and they decided to take a wall out on this patio home and make it a 2-bedroom above grade. And there's absolutely no comps for that at all, particularly in this price range. And so that's kind of a tricky situation, right? There's literally no two-bedroom comps that you could provide, and that would require the appraiser to talk about a cost to cure, to put a wall up, because all they did was take it down, right? They could put it back up. So those are kind of one-offs, but do know the appraiser is going to have to find a similar 2-bedroom in a normal scenario of like a split level or split floor that only has 2 bedrooms, 1 baths above grade, and don't compare it to all 3-bedroom, 2-bath above grades, or calculate your numbers all together. I think it's super frustrating sometimes for the appraiser to get a package and everything that you've provided, I can tell, was, you just added all the bedrooms and baths together, and that's how you came up with your numbers. Above grade, super, super important how all that happens in the appraisal process. And let's go back to ANSI real quick. On conventional loans for ANSI, you have to have permanent flooring, a ceiling, and walls. So in a basement, if you've got a concrete floor, it would not count as finished space on a conventional loan. It would on an FHA or a VA, but it would not on a conventional. If it has an exposed ceiling, I've wavered on this one a little bit, because I think sometimes aesthetically that's what somebody wants in their basement, is to have those exposed beams. And so I might get creative and point my photos down so they can't tell that there's no ceiling on it, because I don't want to ding them for that. But yeah, you've got to have finished walls, ceilings, and flooring in a conventional loan in order for it to be counted as living area or finished space for that loan program. So when you're pricing your properties and you're thinking that's probably the loan program that's going to go, keep that in mind, that they might not be able to give you full value or any value as finished space down there if it doesn't have those features. So now we're going to talk about the reconsideration of value process a little bit more. So we talked about Tidewater on the VA side. If we go to conventional, Fannie and Freddie have their new process now for an ROV, or a reconsideration of value, and they've got forms to fill out. I'm always available to help with that, because I know it can be frustrating. And at a minimum, what I do on a pretty regular basis is take a look at the appraisal that was done and tell you if I think that you could get more value out of it, or if you're going to waste your time. Because sometimes I've gotten a reconsideration of value and it's not one of my regular lenders, and the comp that they provided is going to bring the value down. I don't even let them know. I just stick it in there, and then the value goes down. But if it's, my local guys that we love doing business with, I'm going to pick up the phone and be, hey, Leslie, if I look at that comp, it's going to actually bring it down by like $2,000. So you might want to have them pull that one out of the reconsideration. And I'm hoping that all appraisers will do something similar that have relationships with these lenders, because it's super important to the process, right? Again, I don't want to kill anybody's deal. So I certainly don't want to come down in my value. But I will tell you, I've gotten these reconsideration values, and I'm shocked that these agents have not gone in and done their adjustments. You've got the appraisal in front of you. You can see what I adjusted for end units. You can look at condition and see what I'm adjusting for. Do that to your reconsideration of value comps, and make sure what you're going to provide is going to support. Because sometimes, again, you don't even look at living area, and you make a living area adjustment alone, and you're not even going to support the value, which is probably why the appraiser didn't use it in the first place. So careful what you ask for, because it could come back to hurt you on a reconsideration if you don't provide the right comps to them. They have to be superior to the ones already used. So if everything the appraiser used is in the last 90 days, and you're going to go throw in 180 day, they're going to immediately not just say no, unless it's really good reason, right? It's located next door, or it's just as nice as the subject and they didn't have anything as nice. Like, there could be a reason you could use an older one, but always make sure you're looking at the original appraisal, and the comps that you're going to provide need to be superior to what the appraiser already used. Superior in time, similar in size, similar in location. I mean, there has just been so many times where I get a package and I can see all they did was pick every comp over $800,000 within 5 miles. Not how we determine value. Like, no. And they're just going to look at you and roll their eyes. Or you're going to get the letter from the agent that says, well, if you had adjusted at $316 a square foot for the comps, then you would have made value. But appraisal adjustments are never based on a cost per square foot basis. That's not how we determine value. we extract it from the market. So I go and look and see what the differences are between the comps that I chose. And my living area adjustment is probably going to be somewhere between $50 and $100 a square foot, nowhere near your $316. So never, ever, ever write that to an appraiser, because then they're just going to roll their eyes and be like, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about in the appraisal process. So it's not how we determine value, and nor will it ever be, because if we were to make those kind of adjustments in the appraisals, the numbers would be thrown so out of whack, it would never work. It's always based on market reaction and buyer reaction rather than actual cost for anything. You know, that's decks and upgrades. You could put a $50,000 kitchen in the property, but the appraisal is only going to reflect 20, for example, because that's what we determine a buyer is willing to pay for those particular upgrades based on another sale that we use that has similar upgrades and what it adjusted for. So I hope that makes sense. Things to look for in a reconsideration of value would be, look at views. I do a whole lot of review work. And one of the things I think a lot of appraisers miss are views. They just put residential. It's just everything's neutral residential. They didn't pay attention to the fact that yours has a nice wooded view and comp 1 backs to Route 7 and could certainly have a fairly large view adjustment for something like that. So look at views, as I think that's a really easy one to probably pull some more money out of. So fireplaces and fences are not something that every appraiser includes in the appraisal process. When our forms changed years ago, they actually took those 2 items off of the what's listed on the left-hand side of our grid, but we can add them if they work for us. So careful though, right? Because if you have 1 fireplace and some of these comps might have 2 and the appraiser chose not to put them in, it could hurt you. So you got to make sure you're doing your due diligence there. But I do find that sometimes, it's an extra $2,000-$3,000 that could be added for a fireplace or a fence if you go and look at the comps and see that, they did or didn't have those, and we could add for that. So that's always a good place to sort of check to see if you can pull a couple thousand. Don't nitpick, right? If you're looking at the appraisal and they marked microwave and you don't have a microwave, or they put asphalt driveway and it's concrete, you're just, you get more bees with sugar or honey than vinegar or whatever it is, right? If you kind of come at them from that perspective, you're probably not going to get as good at it. But if you come at it with, okay, hey, thanks so much for your hard work on this. What do you think about that? I'm telling you, it goes a long way for appraisers. I really don't care. I just know a lot of appraisers and I know how they act and I get it. So let's come at them with that, kill them with kindness thing. And when you come back with comps, it should be no more than 5. There's nothing more irritating than getting, 29 printouts from MLS. You didn't even bother to go through them. You can tell all you did was print them all out. If you give us 5 good comps with some good commentary about why or why not these should or shouldn't be used, that is super helpful to us. And I think you'll go a lot longer than, go a lot further with that appraiser if you were to narrow it down to sort of some top 5 comps. Now, I'll tell you, in the VA process for Tidewater, you don't always know what comps they're going to use because you don't have the appraisal yet. So my suggestion is ask. If you ask me, I will tell you what comps I'm using. I do know there are some VA appraisers that will not do that. I don't know why. I mean, all of us have been doing this a long time. Before I walk in the house, I generally know what my value is going to be. I know what comps I'm going to use. So why wouldn't I share that with you so that you don't waste your time providing me with the same ones that I already have? So it can't hurt to ask. All they can do is tell you no. And then for the VA process, you do actually have to grid your comps. You have to sort of put them in the same format as our forms are. And if you ever need any help with that, I can certainly help you do something like that, because it goes a long way to show that you made the effort and that you're actually making adjustments and showing that the value is there. And it just really, really will help in a reconsideration value, both VA and conventional or FHA, if you provide that sort of detailed commentary and show that you've actually done the math and said, hey, with my adjustments, it works. Now, I have gotten some of those, and there's some really interesting adjustments that they put on there. They'll just put this random $20,000 adjustment for bedrooms or some crazy adjustment for something else. Like, obviously, it's not always going to work because you're adjusting it based on your view and not from the appraiser's perspective. And again, I can help with that. And I think as you do more of them yourself, you'll figure out sort of the gist of it, and you'll be able to do it on your own at some point. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight in doing a reconsideration of value and the best way to approach that to an appraiser. And then Leslie had put on here about like prepping your home for the appraisal. You know, what can you do? And my little joke is you can always provide cookies. I'm just kidding, but I can't tell you how many times we show up and there's like this fresh thing of cookies there. And I'm like, okay, things are looking good for these folks. No, but just make sure the utilities are on, obviously, for a FHA and a VA loan. I do have many lenders that are going to require it on a conventional, so it's probably just a good idea that that happens all the time. And I would say things like an FHA or VA, just walk around, right? Are there any faceplates missing? Think of those items where the little kids stick their fingers in things. We do have to test at least one window in every bedroom. Does at least one window open? Make sure they're not painted shut. Is there peeling paint anywhere on a house built prior to 1978? Have it fixed before you go out there, because once they find one thing, they're probably going to find something else to, you know, may as well. We're already going to have to come back for one thing. Let's find more to do. Handrails on stairs. The VA has not wavered from this. FHA has said that it can be the appraiser's discretion. So it used to be 3 stairs or more, always had to have one. And now it's appraiser's discretion if we feel like it's a safety issue. Because sometimes, you know, you've got like bushes on the side or something, whereas maybe it's not. So if you ever get a weird one where, you know, the appraiser's calling for something strange, you can always run it by me and I can let you know whether I think they're crazy or not. I have seen some crazy requirements for things that don't need to be done, but they are being done. The other day, I don't know if it was for you guys, but it was a stove and they had a microwave above it and they wanted the microwave to be, it was too close. It didn't meet code. Well, I'm not a code enforcement person. I can't believe that they conditioned for it, but they actually had to remove the microwave because it was less than 13 inches from the top of the stove. And evidently that's some sort of BOCA code or something. Last I checked, I wasn't a home inspector, so I can't believe they called for it, but they did. It was on an FHA. You know, you do get some crazy things, and they ended up doing it. They just took it out and the people put it back when they came in. I mean, do I think it was a little close? Yeah, but should I have conditioned for it? Should they have conditioned for it? Probably not. Broken windows. So like a cracked window is not such a big deal, but if it's, you know, you can actually feel it with your hand when you touch the window, that could be a safety issue. Those you should try to take care of ahead of time. I've seen people like leave a note next to the window saying, hey, we've already ordered it, so you know it's coming, and they're already working on it. We do have to have access to attic and crawl spaces for an FHA or VA loan. So if you've got a house with 10-foot ceilings, it might be really nice to already have the ladder ready, or you can provide the home inspection report if the home inspector already got up in there, and show us those photos, because that's acceptable to accept as an inspection of those if they didn't find any issues with it. So that's a way to nip an extra inspection in the bud, is if you already have that information, you know, that, because we only bring a 4-foot ladder. So I'm 5'9". If I can't reach it, you know, then I got a condition for someone to bring me a taller ladder or the home inspection. So that's super helpful. Crawl space, ooh, gross. If you could maybe like clean around it so that the spiders don't follow me, I would really love that too. That goes a long way in my book. But we just have to do head and shoulders, right? I just got to get myself in there. I don't ever put my head and shoulders in a crawl space, but I do put my camera in there and I, you know, pan around and do my thing. And what we're looking for, things like water in the crawl space. If it doesn't have a vapor barrier. In the attic, we're looking for things like water stains on the ceilings. You wouldn't believe what we found in attics: birds, dead ones, money, found money one time, all kinds of crazy things up in the attic. But yeah, we're just looking for those kind of items in those areas, and access to those, super important for the FHA and the VA loans. Conventional does not have to have that. If you have a floor,
yes. Just real quick. We are over our 30 minutes, but you're giving such great information. I just want to let you know we do have some questions in the chat that we're going to want you to answer. And anybody who's on the call who has to jump off, we are going to be recording this, so you'll be able to hear the rest of it if you have to run off. But the information's so valuable. Anybody who wants to stay, let's just keep it going, and we'll make sure all your questions that you put in the chat get answered as well. And if you want to stay and ask any questions of your own on microphone at the end, you can do that as well too. So yes, a little bit longer would be great.
No, that was really it. I was just going to say, as far as providing a plat or a survey in your package is always super helpful. Floor plan, I mean, if it's a difficult property, yeah. If it's, you know, pretty standard, not a big deal. And then I love it if you could email the packages ahead of time, because I like to look at the comps ahead of time that you want us to consider, because we take all original photos whenever we can. We have to on FHA and VA loans. So I like to do that while I'm already out there, so I don't have to make an extra step. So if you could email it, I would love it. And again, in that package, if you could note, why a comp is not a comp is really, really important, and why a good one is a good one, right? I don't get to go in all of the properties that you get to show or preview. So it would be super helpful to get your perspective, like, hey, I showed this to my buyers, they wrote on this one too, but it smells like smoke, or the floor plan was really awful. Tell me why maybe it wasn't a good comp. That's always super helpful to the appraisal process. So that was it for me. I did it.
That information was so powerful and so interesting. So thank you for all of that. And let me just look in the chat here and fire some questions at you.
Okay.
So Reem asks, on Tidewater, do you allow the listing agent to provide comps even when a lender has a business practice that doesn't allow without buyer authorization?
So the Tidewater process is tricky, right? I recommend that you do that ahead of time, because I can't take them from you. My Tidewater comps have to come from the lender. So if you think there's going to be any kind of value issue, provide it with your original package, because you can't provide it once Tidewater's been issued. It has to come from the lender.
Okay. Lisa asks, for a garden condo property, when you are appraising a specific unit, do you inspect the exterior of the building for maintenance issues?
Yes, so that's required now. Ever since that tragedy down in Florida, we actually have to put commentary in our reports now that we didn't note any structural issue. Again, I'm not a home inspector, I'm not a structural person, but we definitely walk around the building and see if we see anything obvious. But we do recommend, obviously, that they get that information from the management company, because I think they all have to do them regularly now based on the new rules. But yes, we do a cursory glance at the outside of the building. Absolutely. Have I ever seen anything? One time in DC, huge crack in one of the units, and there was actually a sign on the door. And had we not walked around, we would have never seen it. And that particular unit even said that it wasn't safe, and we had to make a big deal about it in the appraisal. So only one time in 25 years.
Okay. I can't remember from which part of your presentation this came from, but Reem asked, what about a 2-level condo where there is a bedroom on the upper level, no bathroom, but a bedroom with windows? If you can figure out what that was in reference to, or Reem, if you want to come off of your
probably living area. So a condo, no matter what, doesn't follow ANSI standards like that. So we would count that all above grade. It would be all living area, either above grade or, depending on how the tax record has it, but it would be inclusive of living area.
And the tax record has it as a 2-bedroom, even though I think it should be a 3 because of that 3rd bedroom upstairs.
So I just ran into one of these recently that was the same thing, and I could not figure out why tax records was saying 3 or 2, whichever way it was. It was opposite of what the actual unit had, and they were all configured the same way. So, as long as it's got the window and a door, then the appraiser can call it a bedroom, despite what tax records may say. But yeah, it does have to have, egress and a door in order to be considered a bedroom. Supposed to have a closet, but we're being nicer about that lately.
Okay. And it does have a closet, but there's no bathroom on that upper level.
That's okay. You don't have to have a bathroom. There's lots of Cape Cods that have 2 bedrooms upstairs and only the bathroom's only on the main level. That's not required.
Thank you.
What an agent is asking, do you prefer that an agent is not in the property when you come to inspect it? Would you rather have everything over email, or do you want to meet them there or have them leave a package for you?
I'm going to be brutally honest. I prefer to go by myself, right? I can go and do my inspection super quick. And although I love to chat, I usually have back-to-back appointments. And so when I meet, and I give a time range of an hour because of traffic and whatnot. So I generally prefer not to meet somebody, but I would never say no. Like, if you want to be there and you want to point out things to me, I will accommodate you all day long. But I will tell you, 99% of appraisers will tell you they prefer no one be there.
Okay. I think that was the question.
Yeah.
Here's another question. Seller contributions. This agent has a listing. She received an offer asking for a $10,000 seller contribution. She wants to know if taking that into effect, will that affect her value?
No. So we never adjust seller concessions for the subject property, but we would adjust them on comparables. So if we have a comp that we can tell sold $10,000 over contract price to accommodate some concessions, right? Because I can see the price go up from list price. Fannie Mae says we have to adjust for that, but we never adjust the subject property for their concessions. Now, if you increased your contract price to accommodate those, we got to make sure that, we can provide comps to support that, but the concessions themselves would never be adjusted for on the subject side.
Okay. I have another one here. Can a property have missing appliances?
Yes. If the appliances are there on an FHA loan, then they have to be working, but if they're not there, it's not required.
Okay. One more here. Finished level detached house or townhouse, 3 levels, all above grade. Does the first level get counted as finished square feet? There are full windows and walkout door entry.
If it's for a conventional loan in ANSI, yes. If the county counts it as basement, so you have to look at the tax records to see how the county does it, and you have a VA or an FHA loan, the appraiser is going to follow what the county does. And so it would be 2 levels with the basement if that's how the tax record says it. So it depends on the loan program.
Okay. One last question. I don't know that this will come up a whole lot, but for more agricultural type properties that have outbuildings, how will any additional structures be taken into consideration on the land? And would there be any issues if there are animals on the property like cows or horses?
That depends. So we do have to provide commentary on any property that's zoned agricultural to determine the highest and best use of the property. I can tell you in my many years, it's never a problem. I mean, I live on 10 acres zoned agricultural and I don't have any chickens or anything. So we do have to comment if we deemed there was any farming going on and if there's any income producing aspects of the property. As long as the majority of the property is used as residential, it will not be an issue to do a residential appraisal on it. As far as outbuildings, they do have to be inspected and measured. Almost every lender, especially if it's FHA, requires interior photos of all outbuildings, anything that we're going to give value to. So we do have to have access to that. And the adjustments for those are going to be based on market reaction, right? So a really nice 8-stall stable with heat and whatever is going to be very different than perhaps your, Morton building that you put up on it. So that's going to be very specific to a property. And if someone has a specific question about one of those, they can always catch me offline and I can help them with that.
A couple more questions here. Katie's asking, would we have to provide the entire home inspection report or are there relevant excerpts okay? I think in the example that you made where, if you didn't have to get up on the ladder, could you just provide that?
Absolutely. Honestly, I don't want to see your whole home inspection because I don't even want to know maybe some of the things that were in there. So you could just provide us with the attic inspection portion would be fantastic.
Julie and Rob are asking, how much does hardscape play into the appraisal?
Hardscape as in like patios, I'll give value to. But if you've got like retaining walls and sidewalks that lead down from the front of the side of the house, nothing there.
Okay. Julie and Rob, does demand for a home play any part? For example, a home gets 10 offers and the price is driven up. Isn't that indicative of market value?
You would think that, right? But market value is based on historical data. So the one good thing that Fannie has done, there aren't many, is that they now want us to really review market data on a more recent. So we used to always do like 3, 6, and 12 month and determine a market change, but we know the market change is way faster than that. So they do want us to look at it on a monthly basis now and make time adjustment or market adjustments accordingly. So before we were very, well, it was tough to make a time adjustment because lenders hated it, Fannie hated it. Well, now they love it. And they want us to do it if it's warranted. So while the fact that you got 10 offers isn't going to change things, it does. We do have to look at the market a little bit and say, hey, do we need to make a market adjustment? This market's super hot. Things are going up, 1% a month. And then that should be the adjustment that's applied to all the comparables. And it's always going to be from contract date. So you could have something that settled last month, but it contracted 3 months ago. And it could have, a 3% adjustment instead of only 1 because it sold last month versus contracting 3 months ago. So always look at that. So yeah, the number of contracts doesn't play into it, but the whole what's happening in the market does. But I'm going to tell you, we're starting to see a decline in values now. We're seeing things not get multiple offers. I'm actually appraising things higher than contract price. I'm having a hard time bringing the value down to the contract price. So I think the market is shifting a smidgen right now.
How do appraisers handle the fact that the buyer compensation is no longer public information?
Never was a factor for us. So doesn't matter, but I do think that the fact that Bright MLS has now made it optional to show us concessions is a problem, because, you know, NAR's settlement was all about transparency, and there's nothing transparent about not telling me how much the concessions were. And because that is something that affected the value of a property, that they got a concession, not buyer broker compensation. So if they got $50,000 in concessions, I need to know that, because I think it may have affected the contract price and I should be adjusting for it. But now it's an option in Bright MLS to even give me that information. And we're fighting with them about it, because no other MLS system hides it. And you can hide your broker compensation all day long, but I think you should be putting concessions in, because I think it's an important factor in the market.
Okay, one last question here. Is there value for an in-ground pool?
Absolutely. I have one and I absolutely love it. I talked to many appraisers that are like, oh my God, you can only use it for 3 months out of the year. It can't have any value. I totally disagree with that. Is it what you paid for it? Absolutely not. The other day we did one in Ashburn, and it was a 7,000 square foot lot with an in-ground pool. I think it ended up being a detriment to that property because they had no backyard. But I did find a comp that had the exact same pool in their yard, thank God. So that's the key, right? The appraiser has to go find a comp with the pool in order to extract what that value is. But yes, they have value in the appraisal process.
Great, awesome. Such great information today, Kim. Thank you so much. And thanks,
You're very welcome.
Thanks to everybody for joining and these questions. Like we said before, there's going to be we'll be sending that out after. And yeah, this is just so valuable to have you today. And we really appreciate your time.
Sure.
So thank you, everybody.
Leslie's got my contact information. So if anybody ever needs to reach me, just reach out to her and she can provide that to you.
I'm happy to.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.